What do we know about enlightenment? Is it real? Is there a salvation of sorts beyond the veil? For millennia, we've been trying to pierce through the darkness and break free of the illusion of this reality. And there are so many versions of this. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Michael Lydon, a seasoned expert in helping spiritually oriented adults permanently resolve trauma-based imprints and self-limiting patterns. With over 15 years of experience teaching in the field of consciousness development, Michael offers transformative classes and one-on-one sessions designed to guide individuals toward embodied spiritual awakening and deep healing. Prepare for an enlightening conversation with Michael as we dive into his profound insights and approaches to spiritual and psychological transformation.
We could say that there is an underlying field of being that we can experience at different depths. It doesn't seem to change or move, okay? And there's other, and I'm speaking from personal experience here, right? Because I've had that experience. I can go into that when I meditate. It's very nice. It's very pleasant. You can use it for healing and all of that. And it's wonderful. There are other experiences which you could call non-dual experiences or non-dual adjacent, or they're definitely spiritual, where to me it has felt like, and this is when I was just praying one night and wasn't really expecting anything to happen. I just felt like my heart was open. And then it was almost like reaching out to, God.com. When you get an email back, even if there's no subject line, you still feel the presence and the power that comes from that. And it is not, it feels like it is something more than it felt like something much more than what my mind body system could do on its own. And it felt qualitatively different than just that steady state field. It felt more like an active presence and a power that was like, there were no words to it, but it was something like, hey, I'm here.
So today we'll be talking to Michael Lydon. He's a friend of mine from the Perfectly Okay community of lots of like-minded people who have been through the Finder's course, but it's not exclusively limited to people who have graduated from the Finder's course. More and more people are now finding out about Perfectly Okay community and are joining, and it just, you just have to have an interest in spiritual subjects, and you can come in, and we have all kinds of meetups and Zoom calls and all kinds of resources. So I'll be talking to Michael. Do you have any questions about Michael or anything?
Michael was just a guest on the POK Zoom call, right? Was he part of the Finder's course?
Yes, as far as I know, he came to the Perfectly Okay community via the Finder's course, like so many of us have. But he's also a therapist and a teacher in his own right. So every week we have guest speakers, spiritual teachers or psychological people, whatever, anything that's relevant. Then they give talk about what they're doing. So he was on a guest speaker Zoom call yesterday. I couldn't attend because I have my radio show on Sunday mornings, but it's recorded, so I'll probably tune into it later on.
Well, would you like to give a plug for your radio show as long as you mentioned it?
Absolutely. I've got two radio shows. One Sunday morning, I do the doo-wop shop. I play all the golden oldies from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and that's my doo-wop shop. But on Mondays, and today is a Monday, and I'll be doing my second radio show, Seekers and Finders, on WIOX FM 91.3 in Roxbury, New York, right here in the heart of the Catskills. But also it's available anywhere in the world at WIOXradio.org. Today at 1 o'clock, I'll be interviewing my good friend, and we've had him on this. We've interviewed him here, Jerry Katz. He's the guy who started all this non-duality stuff. I'm gonna take him to task. And Michael, I think Michael, he's not a non-duality fan, Michael, so he'll be taking me to task today. I've duked it out with Michael on Facebook about non-duality because he's not into non-duality, and we're battling back and forth. So we'll have a good stimulating conversation.
Yes. And based on what I read about Michael, I finally have someone on our podcast that I'm
You have
aligned
an
with.
ally. See, I've had John Aston and Dina on here, Dina Evans and Jerry Katz. Who else do we have on from Non-Dual?
Steve Fulmer.
Steve Fulmer. Okay, Steve Fulmer, because he's a big Peter Brown guy.
Nishigadarte, yeah.
And this is good doctor. So you've been isolated. Now I'm going to be the isolated guy because Michael is going to be in your camp, and then he's going to attack me. But that's okay. I like it.
But in the meantime, we can mention that we do have something very much in common, and that's doo-wop. Being of the same generation, and you being from Staten Island originally, me being from Philadelphia, big doo-wop communities.
And not only that, yesterday on the doo-wop shop, I featured the Philly sound, the Philly doo-wop sound, the Philly soul sound, and our friend Gio tuned in. He loves it because he's from South Jersey and he knows all the Philly thing. He's steeped in Philly. Who was that DJ in Philadelphia? Jerry Blavitt?
Jocko. Oh, well, there was Jocko. Yes, Jocko was from Philadelphia. Jerry Blavitt was from Philadelphia.
Jerry Blavitt's the guy that Gio likes very much. I was a big Jocko fan. I just never connected him with Philadelphia. I used to listen to Jocko every night. But let's talk more about what we're going to talk about today with Michael Lydon.
Actually, it's very interesting because he made a statement here that he sent along that there's a spiritual myth that psychotherapy is all intellectual and has nothing to do with non-duality. And that's a very interesting point to raise because I think that non-duality is intellectual. And just in the conversations that we've had most recently with two top non-dualists, it's funny that the word is dual. We're dueling.
We're definitely dueling about
We are dueling.
We're definitely dueling about duality and non-duality. I mean, there's a whole big duke out, between, and this happens on POK, Perfectly Okay. We're going to put in a link to that, Perfectly Okay, spelled out, perfectlyok.org. And we duke it out all the time on the POK forum about, non-duality and duality and all this stuff.
The idea of being spiritual is to unload all the BS that you have and come to a place of peace and light. And so far, the light has been not as bright as I thought it was going to be with, some of these non-dualists.
That's what we're going to get to today, because Michael Lydon shares exactly the view that you were just expressing. In other words, it's all about deconditioning and getting out from under all the conditioning to allow the light to come in. Whereas some of the hardcore type non-dual say, no, forget about that. You don't need to do anything because you're already blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's where the tension is. Welcome, Michael. We've been talking about you and a whole bunch of things in our pregame warm-up. We call it a pregame warm-up. And what I said was, I know you largely through the Perfectly Okay community that has been formed out of people who graduated from the Finder's course. So I want to say hi and welcome. Stefan is here with us. He's the co-host of the podcast.
Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you guys for having me, and nice to meet you.
I have been spending some time on YouTube listening to your podcast from some years ago with other people, as well as your realization videos. And I find that for the first time in a long time on these podcasts, I have someone who is in alignment with me.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that. It's always nice to find alignment with other folks.
Well, I've been dueling with non-dualists for the last couple of weeks, trying to get them to explain to me what it is they are actually experiencing in this space of non-duality. And all I get is that they can't express it because there are no words to express it.
Well, for people just tuning in, let's say, and not familiar with Michael, let me read a few of the notes that I have here on Michael that Michael provided, and give to give everybody a little background to see who Michael is, what Michael's involved with. So Michael specializes in helping spiritually oriented adults permanently resolve trauma-based imprints and self-limiting patterns. With over 15 years of experience teaching in the domain of consciousness development, Michael now offers classes and one-on-one sessions that help people experience embodied spiritual awakening and transformative psychological healing. Now, Michael is a contributing author in the second edition of the psychotherapy textbook, Unlocking the Emotional Brain. I got the book here.
Oh, wow.
Michael has a great article in there, chapter 21, which explores how unitive consciousness, that's where non-duality comes in, how unitive consciousness experiences can aid clients with childhood trauma in resolving insecure attachment. Now, I want to stop there because we got a lot. Just that's Michael's background, but I want to put in a plug. Michael's part of this perfectly okay community that we spoke about. We've had people on from POK. We're going to post the links to that. Michael gives free one-on-one sessions to people who are part of that group, and you can join the group if you have any interest in spirituality or psychological healing and development. So let's kick it off. Let's kick it off from there. Is there anything in there, Michael, that you want to kick it off with, or would you be more comfortable with us just asking you questions?
There is one thing that I just wanted to clarify, because in that bio, I talk about helping people permanently shift out of self-limiting patterns. And that word permanent could be controversial, but I just want to qualify what permanent means. If you see a magic trick on stage and then you learn how the magic trick is done, you can't unsee it. You'll always see the magic trick as such, right? And therapeutic work, when it's effective, works in a similar way, because the first phase that you go through is feeling like, okay, I have an energy block, or I have this low self-worth pattern, or whatever it is. And it just feels like it's happening to me, right? It's mysterious, kind of like the magic trick is. But once a person is able to integrate from a deeper level of their mind, which I call the feeling level of the mind, once they're able to integrate what is actually causing that symptom to happen, it no longer, and they're able to, resolve it as a problem in ordinary awareness, then in the same way that they can't unsee how the magic trick is done, they're no longer susceptible to this unconscious pattern happening. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Makes great sense to me. How about you, Stefan?
Everything he said so far has made sense to me, so I'm really excited
Stefan
about
I know Stefan is happy because we've had guests on that will give us a spiel, and then he'll say, no, that didn't make any sense. So this is good. This is very, very good.
I have journeyed down this road, and my greatest manifestations have been through physical and psychological experiences, where I've finally, at a certain point, after all these years of meditation and searching and seeking, and if you want to say, I finally found this the witness side of me that has become a separate entity inside of me that I like to relate to as my higher being or my soul, that informs me from a deeper place about the correct design in life and how to move forward with it in a state of contentment or peace, and being able to overcome all the hurdles that happen on a day-to-day basis without becoming attached to them. And therefore, with the non-attachment to whatever's going down, it can keep you in a state of balance. And balance is something that I've always sought because I'm a very emotional being, reactive to things in my emotional body, in my solar plexus. And my goal was to always bring that down to a settling point where it wasn't the leader of my life, where I could see everything in a more balanced state. So it's not reactive. So, anger and, joy are brought to a place of presence. And the new buzzword is aliveness. And I've yet to hear anybody explain what they mean by aliveness. Um, and, and I guess I'm, caught up in words, but perhaps you can give us some guidance on this, Michael. So that's my whole thing. And, like I said, I read all of your stuff. I watched you and I said, you know what, this guy is exactly where I'm at feeling. Now, perhaps you'll show that I'm incorrect, but so far we're there.
Yeah, everything that you said, including a higher being or a higher self, greater being, however you want to call that, we're very much in alignment on that. Everything you said, I can definitely relate to, and that's my language. You're speaking my language.
So, what about this idea of myth busting? Well, the non-duality point of view, if you want to go there, because I think that's something that we wanted to cover today.
Well, so before we do that, you had asked about aliveness, and I want to just address that first.
Oh, good. Okay, great.
Okay. So different people might mean different things by the word aliveness. So if you ask me how I would define aliveness, right? We can talk about it in two ways. One way is somebody might be talking about aliveness as just the openness of pulsation and flow of chi or prana in the body, and the vividness of physical perceptions and sensations. Somebody might talk about aliveness that way. Another way we could talk about aliveness is as this more subtle kind of pervasive feeling of a kind of life resonance that's everywhere. I feel like that's a more subtle experience than the pulsation and flow kind of energy that moves through the body. But I mean, there's any number of ways we could talk about aliveness. I can't know without talking to them what other non-dual teachers might mean with that word.
Okay, so if I can just interject here, my experience with it has been, and nothing has been mentioned in the non-duality community about love, and specifically unconditional love, which is a very divine concept. All right, yes. Because it's not a human step. It's something that overwhelms you, embraces you, and that brings you to a state of oneness in the cosmos. Now, I have had that experience. I had it during the Olympics, watching people that were thought to be not even had a chance of winning a race and came in first. And as that happened, when I see the human rise to greatness, all of a sudden, I get this overwhelming feeling of unconditional love. It starts physically in my heart center, and I can feel the vibration expanding out and beyond my body. And it's as though two arms have embraced me because I become molecular. I just dissipate into a state of oneness wherever I am. And that to me is the aliveness that I can say I experience. And I'm hoping that's what but I'm curious why the non-dual community never talks about love in that overwhelming state, which is what the divine really is all about.
Well, if you're asking me why the non-dual community doesn't talk about that to agree that that feels appropriate or sufficient, I can't. I don't feel like I'm a representative of the non-dual community, so I can't be their lawyer. As to why they don't address it. I think it's a fair question. Um, Here's what I think. I think that different practices and different approaches to spirituality will yield different experiences and revelations. That's as simple as it can be said. And if what your inclination is that sort of that love saturated devotional path, or a kind of attunement to divinity that has those qualities of unconditional love in it, or gives rise to unconditional love within our soul and within the mind body system, um, then that's beautiful. I mean, that's part of how I'm oriented too. So um, yeah, but to answer I don't really have an answer beyond that in terms of why uh, certain pockets of the non-dual community at least are not interested in that.
Well, that's a good point. So now let me ask Gary, because he's part of the non-dual community. Um, can you tell us why love is not a part of the, or I haven't heard it yet. Do you talk about it on the POK group?
Well, the POK group is not a non-dual community. In fact, within the POK group, I would say 90% of the POK members would more or less fall into your camp and Michael's camp of developmental, the idea of the developmental thing. And I would say a small minority of the POK community would be into what we'll call now the non-dual camp. Even though, go ahead, Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, can we pause here for 1 second? Because I just want to, if you guys are throwing out terminology, I just want to make sure that I have the same understanding that you do about that. So when I say that spiritual, that self-realization or enlightenment, awakening, liberation, and so forth, that all of that is developmental, what I mean is that happens in the context of a mind-body system. You could, okay, within my spiritual paradigm, it would be the mixture of a soul that carries on from lifetime to lifetime. It's the mixture of that with a mind-body system that is whatever your present human body is. And so then it's like this. Non-duality is correct, or what I see as non-duality, it's correct in that there are steady state levels of being that never change, that are always there in the background. And you can have sudden insights and sudden shifts and sudden awakenings to those. And I believe that it's objectively true and real that they're always there. And you can always, if you just sink, you get to a certain point as a meditator where you can just sort of sink into that and it's there, or your mind body system goes through a shift whereby it comes more to the foreground of your everyday waking experience. Okay, so but I still see that as something where you have to ask for that. With very rare exceptions, you really have to ask for that experience for it to happen. Or you have to do exercises, whether it's devotional or otherwise, meditation, whatever it is. You do have to do something, even if it's settling into that state. There's still some volition that you have to apply in order to get there, to receive some sort of grace or to receive something that's already there. So does that make sense in terms of how? So I don't think there's a real, in my view anyway, I don't think there's a real contradiction between the developmental view that all this is happening within your mind body. All this is happening to your mind body system, or my mind body system. That's still the context in which specific instances of awakening happen. But also there are fields of being that really don't seem to change or evolve. And those are, and that's why when we talk about awakening, we can have a meaningful conversation about what it is.
That's why I was about to say, Michael, before you began your last piece there, that's why I was about to say, I was saying, well, you're in that camp, let's say you and Stefan, and the non-dualists are in this camp. And I was about to say, but there really is no two camps, because from a non-dual perspective, all that you said is absolutely true, and is contained within the all-embracing, all-inclusive non-dual view. So there's room for everything. So what you said is perfectly in line with the way I think about things, the way I see things, and there's no like either or. It's just an embrace of this and. It's not either or, it's and. So everything is operating, beautifully within the context that you just described. What I did want to say in answer to Stefan's question about how come these people don't talk about love when love is really where it's at? Well, okay, number one, yes, in general, I would agree with that non-dual, when you're in non-dual conversations, love is not coming into the picture, but it's there. And I like the word you used, Michael, pockets. Yeah, listen, I've heard some pretty hardcore non-dual people talk about unconditional love. So I mean, it's there, but yeah, it's not emphasized because non-duality is more like a wisdom kind of thing. A mind of light, insight, wisdom, and you have the devotional, the bhakti path is all love and surrender and devotion. But those two things, as Nisargadatta and as Ramana Maharshi and as many Ramakrishna, as many great spiritual teachers will say, they're not two different things, but yes, sometimes one gets emphasized. And what does Nisargadatta say? He says, my life swings back between the two poles, jnana, wisdom, bhakti, love. It's not like one or the other. So I don't, because of my experience with the non-dual community, I know it's there, but yes, a lot of times, you get the impression if you check these, they're like, hey, they're all talking about insight, wisdom, enlightenment, but like, where's the love? Well, I think it's there, but yes, it's not always apparent.
Okay, but let me just bring this up, that everyone that I've spoken to, the non-duality people have said, there is no practice. You're already there. There's nothing to practice. But that's a simplistic kind of way of saying, oh, I'm already enlightened. I don't need to do anything. But I beg to differ. Enlightenment is just not intellectually imagining that you're enlightened already and you're there. I mean, there is definitely a life practice of getting rid of all of the bullshit that you have been conditioned with all of your life, and finally coming to a state of total awareness of what everything is. But just to say that you don't need any practice, you're there already, that doesn't ride with me. I'm sorry.
Okay, this is where Michael comes in. This is precisely where Michael comes in, because we're going to talk about myth busting. What are some of these myths about enlightenment and non-duality? So this is where Michael comes in. So I want to hear what he has to say, because that's what he works with.
So I think to speak to what Stefan was just saying, look, I agree with that. And I think that I've never heard a good argument, and I've never seen an actual example to the contrary. In other words, before, I don't want to name names, but some of the radical non-dual people, I think, is what you're referring to. The radical non-dual camp to say you don't have to do anything, you're already there. Okay. So, there was a before, and even though they say there was no event that happened, it's silly to talk about any event because whatever, it's all just eternity, it's all just this. So there's nothing ever to happen besides just this, or whatever language they want to give to that. Well, there was a moment before they were getting on stage and saying that stuff. There was a moment before they had a shift. So, if that's also true, it's hard to deny things that are actually happening in our experience in a given moment, or that have actually been our life. Does that make sense? Okay, let me put it like this, right? This is I'm paraphrasing something that a member of the Perfectly Okay community. He's not. I don't know if he's a teacher or not, but he's somebody who's just in our Facebook group. His name is Srikanth Sharma. He said, I used to think that I used to buy into this whole radical non-dual thing where you're already there, you're already there. And he said something like, but I realized that it was like putting my underpants on the outside and saying that I was Superman. It didn't actually provoke any transformative shift to say those types of things and to believe that you're already there. So it comes back to, I think that telling people that they're already there, maybe that sells books or sells workshops, but if it doesn't actually change somebody's ongoing relationship to life and existence, then who cares? Then it's not a skillful teaching.
And so at that point, let me just read something that you wrote earlier, Michael, because we were going back and forth. You said on the topic of enlightenment and awakening. And here's what you say. It's developmental. See, unlike you don't have to do anything. You're already there. No, it's developmental, even though sudden shifts exist. The cause of awakening is the attunement to an underlying ground of being. And that's what you were referring to before. You said that there's always this permanent, thing going on. Okay, so here are your words. The cause of awakening is the attunement to an underlying ground of being and or deconditioning that happens at a sufficiently deep level, or qualities of what they call, I guess it's of qualities of what they call divinity. So this is where the Stefan's divinity comes in. So it's all connected. So one of the myths then that we would be busting here, and there's just like, oh well, you don't have to do anything, you're already there. And as Sharma said, it's like putting on your underwear and thinking you're Superman. Yeah, and that's a myth of enlightenment, you would say.
Yes, because there's an author and somebody who taught at the Monroe Institute for many years and has now developed a series of books called My Big Toe. His name is Tom Campbell, who we've also interviewed in the POK community. But in any case, he's fond of saying that if it's not your experience, it's not your truth, right? So even if it is actually true that there are these steady state, unchanging fields of being that exist, or this one unified field of consciousness that exists, if it's not somebody's experience, then it really doesn't make sense for them to override their own moment-to-moment experience with a belief like that. I feel that what's actually more helpful and pragmatic is for them to kind of, just be open to the notion that maybe there is this underlying field of being. Let me see, and then they can go progressively down through the levels of their in the moment experience to be able to attune to that.
Well, it seems that they try and fight the fact that there's anything else but that non-dual state.
I was a philosophy student before I got my master's in social work, and that is what we would call a performative contradiction. Because if there were just the one thing happening, none of us would be having a conversation. We would just be all together in one, unbroken, luminous existence where nothing is happening.
Correct. And that's my, I don't want to use the word problem. I do want to correct something. The word divinity conjures up this whole religious kind of sensation. And the word divine, I mean, this is where words can get a little sticky.
Yeah.
When I use the word divine experience, it's only that I'm trying to convey an elevated state of being. And I wish there was another word for it, because it's been used to death, the word divine, and doesn't really have the same power anymore than it used to, especially now with social media being like this bullet train of existence that goes on with any thought, and people just would speak I'm not even sure they're speaking their mind anymore. I think they're just speaking their rage or their feeling at the moment, and there's no contemplation anymore deep in that space where each individual, and here's the other thing, everybody's a singular being. I mean, you can talk about oneness as much as you want, but we're here on this earth as individual singular beings, each having an experience. And for each individual to find that space in that enlightenment area where we all become one, that's fine, but we're still individuals having an experience in that space of oneness. And
Yeah.
until we all mesh into that great ocean of the after place, we're still going to be individuals here having this experience.
Okay, so there are things that I would bet you $1 are true, or to me personally, they feel true for me, and it would surprise me greatly if they were not true. For example, what you're talking about of like you know in the afterlife, we the veils come down and then we get to merge with source consciousness or divinity. I have not personally had a near-death experience, so I can't claim that for certain that happens, but I feel deep down I feel that it's true. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. And I'm just trying to be honest about what I know directly and what I don't, what I know from experience in this mind-body system and what I don't. When we're talking about divinity, and Stephanie, I'm with you in that I feel like it's helpful to have a clear definition for things, even though we're talking about things that are transcendent states and experiences. Ralph Nader, the American activist, when he was asked what his political affiliation was, he said, "I'm a moral empiricist." And I really liked that. Because it takes you out of this camp or that camp, right? And so I feel that I strive to be something like a spiritual empiricist. In other words, I think that if there are states of being that pre-exist our human mind, or that you could say that are steady state, or there's some ultimate underlying ground, then there's probably a swath of human beings that have. If people are claiming to experience that thing, whatever it is, then people's experiences are going to line up and they're going to be similar, right? You're going to hear similar descriptions of the same of that, whatever that is. And that's why there's so much, to me, that makes sense of why there's so much overlap in the mystical branches of the world's religions, and also why there's so much overlap in just ordinary people who claim to, have had one spiritual state or the other, who claim to be in some sort of ongoing awakening experience. So with all that said, I have found a really good definition of divinity that lines up with my own personal experience. And I'm gonna just read you a quote. It's from a near-death experiencer who's what you could call a deep afterlife experiencer. I know I'm going on a tangent here, but basically, there's near-death experiencers that wind up that spend some time in that what we could call the afterlife, who are still in a realm that resembles human consciousness and human type things going on. Then there are those which they spend enough time there such that their consciousness is in a domain that feels like they're totally outside of any remnant of the human experience. They're in the native, you could say, the native realm of the solar spirit. Okay. And so to quote somebody who says that she went, that was her experience, she says, "The God I experienced firsthand is neither male nor female nor human-like. It is the source of our universe. What I call source is what most religions refer to as the one supreme deity. Source is an enormous, self-aware, all-knowing, and omnipresent energy field. Its nature is more analogous to electricity or raw energy than to human nature. Source's form is closer to an entity than a being. We are literally part of Source with the same innate characteristics, including curiosity, creativity, multiple levels of awareness, total knowledge, ability to manifest reality, and unconditionally loving nature." So I think that's,
sounds good to me.
Yeah, that's a definition that I think also lines up with, contemplatives who go pretty far and deep into into realms of consciousness that transcend the ordinary mind-body system.
Well, you mentioned the Monroe Institute, and for those who aren't familiar with it, Bob Monroe was an advertising executive who had an experience in his bedroom one night of leaving his body, and started on a journey of OBEs, out-of-body experiences, that led to some very deep exploration, several books on the subject, and an institute in the beautiful mountains of Virginia that you can go to, and they, stimulate you into these moods or places. But he was multidimensional. He understood that there were all of these spaces that he could move into, never really talked about the divine that much, and did have a problem when he said after his wife died that he was going to find her in one of those dimensional states, but never could. So, that kind of messed the whole program up a little bit when he couldn't find her. But still, it says that there are all these other experiences that we are attuned to, but we really don't have the final answer. And the thing that concerns me about the non-dualists are that they believe they have the final answer. But isn't that what we're living our life for, is to explore? Aren't we explorers? Aren't we journeymen who are out there trying to experience all of these things and really don't have the final answer? And we won't know until after we leave the body, if we know at that time.
Yeah, that's what I think. I mean, look, I've spent a lot of years thinking about, because I used to teach classes on astral travel, actually, before I got into this, before I got into my present career, which is, guiding meditation workshops and helping people resolve trauma. I've thought a lot about how does multidimensionality relate to the kind of non-duality or development of spiritual awakening. And I think that the simplest that it can be said is that there are people that have non-dual experiences that do not have multidimensional experiences. And there are people that have multidimensional experiences that are not in stabilized non-duality. But what I've seen is that folks that that are in some level of spiritual awakening do tend to have experiences of energies or other dimensions more frequently. So there's a correlation there. I don't know how it all relates together. I think that one thing that I have found is that if you start to explore all the psychic stuff, and energies and so forth, but you really don't have a solid ground to rest back into, it can be quite overwhelming because you open yourself to all sorts of emotional and energetic information that's just going to feel too much for you if you don't have something like a safe place to land. Yeah.
Okay, so that brings me actually, one of the spiritual myths that you had brought up was that psychotherapy is all intellectual and has nothing to do with non-duality.
I think it's actually a misconception about psychotherapy because, okay, look, let's define three broad approaches to therapy. Okay. One approach might be training new behaviors. Another approach might be installing new meanings or new beliefs to certain things. For example, there are some therapies that are more intellectual, in my opinion, that, if somebody says, oh, I have low self-worth about this or that, they say, oh, well, can you see that you're good at this? Or can you see that, you did this well on this day? And they're trying to install new beliefs. Okay. What that's like is like a building has a rotted out foundation and you're trying to like build on that rotted out foundation without getting at the actual foundation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So there's a third camp of therapies, which I would call transformational, which means that if somebody has a low self-worth symptom, you can't just think that that's the bottom of it. You have to start asking questions like, well, how would it feel for you if in this situation you didn't go negative towards yourself? And it sounds counterintuitive, but generally speaking, a person will say, oh, that would feel great. That's what we would expect, right? They'll say, oh yeah, that'd be great. And that's sort of a surface level response. And then you say, okay, is there anything that would be maybe just let that land for a second. Does it all feel good, or is there anything else that comes up for you? And then they'll say something like, actually, yeah, that's weird. I feel without this going negative towards myself, all of a sudden I feel anxious, like I'm unprotected or something. You see? So there is a thinking mind. And of course, that's where Westerners live most of the time, right? Our thinking mind. And there are some therapies that do primarily work in the domain of the thinking mind. There's others, right? And which can include spiritual techniques, coaching techniques, psychedelics, and all forms of experiential therapy. There's a feeling level of the mind, what Eugene Gendlin called the felt sense. It's a mixture of physical sensations and emotional sensations that we feel throughout the body. And you could say that there's knowings that we have in our thinking mind, and there's knowings that we have in our felt sense, or in spiritual terms, we might say an energy level or something like that. And so when a therapy or transformative deconditioning practice, whatever, gets at that felt sense level, that's where all the juice is, right? And so we could say that's the third level of the third kind of therapeutic practice, which is experiential, dealing with the felt sense and uncovering and integrating the knowings that live in that felt sense so that they can be resolved. Does that make sense? So the reason that so to circle back to your question, the reason that when some non-dual teachers say that, oh, psychotherapy is just intellectual or whatever, and they dismiss it, it's true for some, but not for the transformative types. And especially not true for transpersonal therapies, which incorporate non-dual practices to foster states of whether it's unconditional love or unconditional supportiveness or unconditional safety and that sort of thing, that act as a direct therapeutic, a direct therapeutic support for a person's mind-body system or whatever they're going through. Sorry, that was a long answer, but does that make sense?
No, that's good. But
yep.
There is a wide range of resonance outside of the body.
Yep.
And where thoughts emanate from, because the brain is basically an antenna that's tuning into that resonance that's manifesting those thoughts. I mean, those thoughts just don't come from, that brain matter inside, because the brain's got all of these nerve systems working, and the resonance, which is greater than we as individuals can feel, is producing those thought processes that we're picking up. Well, this is what I believe anyway, and from all the quantum physicists that I've listened to, it seems that there's so much more to the existence of what is than we can possibly understand. They are getting to it now, but resonance is a big part of it. And that vibrational resonance plays upon all of the things that you do, but the mind, the thinking part of it, is how you interpret it. And this interpretation of what life is doesn't seem to be part of the non-dual experience, because it just all is anyway. And there's no thinking behind it. There's no interpretation behind it, even though they're interpreting that this is the way it is. So that's where it gets a little confusing for me.
I want to address a few things that I heard in what you said, just to make sure that we're on the same page. So with regard to resonances and energies that are beyond, let's say, the envelope of our skin, right, beyond the physical body, I experience those too. So I'm not saying that the soul is encapsulated in just the body. So that's thing one. Okay, thing two is that it sounds like you're saying that there is kind of a template for like optimal well-being or something like that we're born with, or that is something that we can know and have access to. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's the whole human design concept, and we could go into that, but I don't want to get too deep into that, because that's a whole other podcast. And we are going to have people on that are part of the human design community that can explain it much better than I can. The template has nothing to do with the resonance. The template is for your own life, how it's basically a psychology of how to live your life properly. But that doesn't have anything to do with the resonance. The resonance has to do with how thoughts enter into your process, where they come from, and not just manifested inside this head. They're actually tuned into this head from a much broader uh, point of reference. And how resonant, or let me put it to you this way. If I walk into a room and there's a dozen people there, there might be one or two people that I resonate with because their vibration and my vibration just seem to happen to meld together nicely. And the rest of the people I have absolutely nothing in common with, and there's no resonating with them. So it's intuitive. And I think, we don't talk about that intuitiveness enough in this whole practice of spirituality, but it is there, and it has a resonance to it. That intuition is feeling a resonance. For example, I was telling Gary 20 minutes before you sent all the information you did, I said, you know what, I'm going to have to ask Michael to send me, his bio and all this information so I can use it in the introduction to the podcast. And then Gary in Messenger said, oh, Michael just sent this information on his bio, exactly what I needed. Now you can say that that's a coincidence, but I like to go a little further than that and believe that there is, a residence in the universe around us that we can sense and feel and talk with. And eventually, in maybe 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 years, people will be communicating just with that resonance and won't have to talk anymore and say any words. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice if we could communicate some of these things in sort of like non-symbolic telepathy or something like that, which is pure resonance. Um, so yeah, so I think we're talking about the same thing here. One of the kind of guest speakers in the Perfectly Okay community, her name's Stephanie Dunning, and Stephanie and I had a conversation once about what she felt was something like a code that everybody has, and it's like if you go against your code, then you really suffer a lot. And it's not like, so a code means things that are resonant with you, and specifically to you. Like there are things that maybe other people can do just fine, but if I do those things, then something will feel off, um, or it'll cause suffering in my mind body system. So are we talking about, is that what we mean by resonance, kind of?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, you have talent. Everyone's got a talent somewhere. That's why
Yeah.
we're here, I think, to express that talent. Some
Yeah.
people's talent is to do nothing, just to be, just to be around people. There are people that have no talent, but just the most beautiful personality, can walk into a room and everybody just feels wonderful because of that presence that the person brought. Other people have talent in acting. Gary's one of them. Uh, Other people have a talent in music, singers. Other people can't sing a note. So everybody's got a specific thing that they uh, can manifest in this life thing. And I think that the resonance is a big part of it. I feel that experience is what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas non-dual people, if I understand this, feel that everything is the experience and they're there already. They don't have to experience anything because the experience is there.
So,
It's
so, so,
happening.
so I can, okay, I want to speak directly to that. Okay. So the field of non-dual consciousness is free from schemas, mental models, thoughts, right? And mental models, in my view, are a very specific, they're not exactly a thought, but they're a kind of um they're a kind of, it's like a belief or something like that. Like you could say it's a kind of knowing, but it's a knowing that is not um what's the right word here? Well, like this, right? if somebody feels as if if somebody has like a low self-worth symptom, then to that feeling level of their being, it feels as if that is true, right? But that is not an objectively permanent, fundamentally true view of the world. Does it make sense?
Yes.
So the ground of being itself, the reason that it helps people to attune to a ground of being, an underlying field of consciousness, is that it feels fundamentally peaceful. It feels fundamentally at ease. It gives rise to the sense of safety and well-being in the mind-body system and all of that. It also can disconfirm a really fixed view of oneself as being no good, because it's not just neutral. It feels actually like, oh, there is some part of us that is good beyond concepts of good, something like that, right? Now, to address what you said about the non-dual folks, or the radical non-dual folks, let's say, who say things like, what was it that there's just this, and what was it? How did you say it, Stefan?
It's all the experience. There's nothing to experience.
There's nothing to experience. So I would say that that position is itself a fixed view.
I agree.
Yeah,
it's a belief system. That I just wanted to get to. Yes.
But it's a belief system that they don't think that they have. And that is why it's so insidious and harmful to people. I actually made a video about this called Toxic Nonduality. On my, it's like a 5-minute video, 5 or 10 minutes on my YouTube channel. So here's part 2 of that conversation that we started earlier about, like, you know, there's different forms, different categories, you could say, of therapeutic work. One is changing behavior. The other is trying to change our meanings about ourselves in a top-down way, or meanings about circumstances in our lives in a top-down way. And, you know, and also that is not, I'm not saying that those things are bad, because sometimes you do actually have to change your behavior. And sometimes you do actually have to tell yourself, okay, you know what, I'm having, my response to this is overblown. Let me just take a minute to chill out, right? So sometimes you do have to do those things. And sometimes there are what we could call mental models or beliefs, or things that we feel are true about reality that are not objectively true and real, but they feel as if they are, right? And working in the intellect alone doesn't help us, doesn't get us to resolution of those things. Okay, so the overlap then between transformative therapy or any kind of transformative work that provokes permanent change, the overlap between that and non-dual realization is something called shifts in our ontology. Okay, so for those who in the audience may not be familiar with this word, ontology refers to how we essentially feel and know ourselves to be, or what we feel is essentially true about reality, and not in our intellect, but as a real embodied visceral experience. Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
Okay. So in non-dual spiritual awakening, the ontological shifts that we tend to have are going from a separate self, you know, a self that feels, or we feel fragmented from parts of our own experience, or we feel fragmented or separate from other people. We feel kind of isolated and alone. We might feel fragmented or separated from divinity or from the ground of being, depending on your spiritual paradigm. And so when we have shifts towards awakening, realizations, revelations, whatever word you want to give for these experiential shifts, you feel less fragmented. You have knowings, you know, these kind of nonverbal knowings or revelations that tell you directly, and that are unshakable certainties about your, you know, oneness with what is, oneness with divinity, or oneness with this ground. Okay, and that also helps us integrate, you know, or be more integrated with our own, within our own psyche, let's say, where, you know, things that we've been holding on to for a long time, it becomes actually easier to experience stuck emotions and things like that, because you could say that these spiritual experiences tend to soften the harshness in our psyche that has us rejecting ourselves all the time. Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
So that's,
it makes perfect sense, everything you're saying, totally comports to my own experience. So I'm 100% on board with what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. And so that we could say those are the ontological shifts that have to do with non-dual experiences or spiritual awakening and so forth. The way that transformative therapy factors in is the following. Let's call non-dual experiences and shifts into awakening forms a specific form of knowing. Okay, that definition limits us in some ways, but it's good. Can that be good enough for now as a form of knowing?
Very good. It is a form of knowing. I would say the same thing.
Okay, so a form of knowing, and if there is a part of us that feels, for example, even if we had shifts towards non-duality or towards awakening, if there's still part of us that feels something like I'm no good, or every other human is going to just hurt me and abuse me like so-and-so did in my past, or if there's some other mental model there, a mental model, you could say, is its own form of knowing. It's not a knowing of something that is fundamentally true, but it's a knowing that we feel deep down and that's difficult to shake off. Okay.
And intuitive.
And yeah, you're right. It can skew our intuition about things, because it's like if we feel as if everybody's going to hurt us deep down, if we think, oh, well, what's going to happen in that situation? Let me use my intuition. Oh, I'm intuiting that person's going to hurt me, right? So point being that let's say we have our total real estate for knowing, right? The real estate of our domain of knowing. False beliefs that come from painful experiences in our past, or things that we've learned, even just things that we've learned in our culture, those take up the real estate that spiritual experiences could otherwise, what's the word? Inhabit. Yeah, take up the real estate that spiritual experience or non-dual experiences or realization can take up in our mind-body system. So another way of saying that is when we resolve those, false beliefs, it gives us more, bandwidth to receive and embody and express this light of non-dual realization, or this light of divinity, however you want to call it.
But there's still a questioning inside of everyone, no matter how enlightened one thinks. They can talk themselves into believing something, but there's always that question out there that's bigger than the talking to themselves that, they're doing something right. There's always that kind of, and it's like convincing yourself that you're there, and till you get to the point where you don't have to convince yourself anymore that you actually are enlightened and are there, there's really no conversation after that. Because once you've reached that point, you really don't have to sit there and try and convince anybody that you're, enlightened. You don't have to say anything. You can just show it. You can express it in your well-being, and people will say, he doesn't say anything, but he's there or she's there. And that's the difference. Everybody's trying to talk so much about how they are, non-dual enlightened. And, there's so much talk, but I don't see the enlightenment. I'm sorry. It doesn't appear to me that there is enlightenment there. It appears to me that they're trying to convince themselves that they're in this enlightened state.
Yeah. Dovetailing off of that, I think that just like in other domains of human experience where, whether it's I don't know, the business world or the world of the arts or whatever it is, there can be pressure to perform or pressure to be a certain thing or be a certain way. And I think that it would, no matter where, so this is for the listeners, wherever you're at in your spiritual process, I know this is going to sound like a cliche, the best thing that you can do is accept yourself wherever you're at. Okay. And without putting any conditions on that. because I think that one thing that can happen if you do have more of a developmental or evolutionary way of thinking about this is you can think someday I'll get there, and then dovetailing off of that, you might think, okay, well, then where I'm at now is not very good, you know, and so that's a pitfall. What's going to be more effective, or be more helpful, is something like this. I accept myself for feeling, being, living as in the present moment X, whatever that is. And then in the present, you can do whatever you need to do. You can let some emotion go. You can let go of whatever standards you have about yourself to be more awakened than you are, or whatever it is. And just get honest. I think that that's something that maybe in the non-dual space is kind of underrated, or maybe not talked about as much, about just being honest with yourself and being honest as to what your actual experience really is in the moment, and just accepting that, having an attitude of acceptance. And that attitude of acceptance is going to bring you already several notches closer to non-duality than will constantly thinking about how far you need to go.
Michael, I think you covered most of the things I wanted to bring up in your last, which was great, by the way, your last little thing, because I want to take what Stefan had brought up a little further. So the spiritual myth, psychotherapy, this is one of the spiritual myths. Psychotherapy is all intellectual and has nothing to do with non-duality. And then see what you went on. This is Michael talking. What I think is a truer view is that any transformative process that does deconditioning well will transform mental models that live at a nonverbal feeling level of being. And you covered that. And then your final statement, when that happens, as individual mind, body, energy system, when that happens as individuals, mind, body, energy system has more, and you use this word, bandwidth, to receive, embody, and express the light of non-dual consciousness, or divinity. Non-dual consciousness and divinity, I would say, are synonyms. So, but I think you covered that. But to me, what you said in that little paragraph is the whole gist of what we're talking about today. In other words, it's not just about, okay, you're already there, you don't have to do anything, you can sit there and do anything. It's a developmental process of removing these kind of stories that we have embedded about ourselves, like, I'm not good enough. Gee, I'm not enlightened. Oh, maybe whatever the story is, whatever that thing is, remove those. And then the bandwidth is there to receive, I would say, the divinity. I like the word divinity. I love the word divine. I love the word God. I love it. I'm comfortable with that. That lets that in, because you're not blocking with these things like, oh, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. It may take me 15 incarnations. No, bullshit. I'm worthy. Let it in. Thank you, God.
Yeah. So, and this is just another way to dovetail off of what you're saying there, Gary. Another way that I'm presently conceptualizing all this stuff. Okay. So we could say that there is an underlying field of being that we can experience at different depths. It doesn't seem to change or move. Okay. And there's other and I'm speaking from personal experience here, right? Because I've had that experience. I can go into that when I meditate. It's very nice. It's very pleasant. You can, you can use it for healing and all of that. And it's wonderful. There are other experiences which you could call non-dual experiences, or non-dual adjacent, or they're definitely spiritual, where to me it has felt like, and this is when I was just praying one night and wasn't really expecting anything to happen. I just felt like my heart was open, and then it was almost like reaching out to God at god.com. When you get an email back, even if there's no subject line, you still feel the presence and the power that comes from that. And it is not, it feels like it is something more than it felt like something much more than what my mind body system could do on its own. And it felt qualitatively different than just that steady state field. It felt more like an active presence and a power that was like, there were no words to it, but it was something like, hey, I'm here. And so that to me is the difference between what some folks refer to as non-duality, which is this one field, and then once your mind settles deep enough into that field, it just feels like everything is arising, and there's kind of like no age, there's a feeling of minimal agency or no agency or something like that, and everything is just happening spontaneously. And I don't know how all this fits together. I humbly do not know how all this fits together. I just know that there are certain experiences that I've had. It's like, hey, wouldn't it be wonderful if I could live like that all the time? And I spend my time in my life and at work trying to piece all that together. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. I think you're right. I think that is one of the critiques. I think personally that's a valid critique of the whole, in general now, we're painting broad strokes, the whole non-dual shtick, where there is this steady state, and that's what we're arriving at, as opposed to the fluctuations of the mind and the comings and the goings. We're now at the steady state. But I think you hit on a key factor, is that there's something else beyond the steady state that you got when you got the email from God or its equivalent, and that is a notch up. I don't personally, based on my own experience in the non-dual community, I think that's what's lacking, because the steady state thing, they're very comfortable, again, generally speaking, very comfortable with the steady state thing. Oh, that's the reality, and the fluctuations, of course, are like waves on the ocean or clouds in the sky. We don't concern about the steady state. But, and this is my belief now, this is an idea, this is just a belief, a concept, that they have not tapped into what you just spoke about, that next notch up, if we could call it that, of divinity, where that steady state is seen not as just some steady, energetic state, neutral state, but the next notch up from that is the experience of, not the belief in, but the experience of divinity itself. And I think that's crucial. At least it's crucial to me. And I think I'm glad you touched on it.
Yeah, right. It feels crucial to me too. Again, I don't have all the answers I don't think anybody does, but I don't know how all this stuff fits together. That does feel like a notch. Yeah, it does feel like a notch more than just the steady state field. And that's, the realization process, I know, which we haven't gotten into, that's it's kind of a body-focused meditation for spiritual awakening and psychological healing that was created by Judith Blackstone, who actually lives in your neck of the woods, Gary.
Woodstock, doesn't she live in Woodstock?
In Woodstock, yeah, she lives and teaches out of Woodstock.
By the way, I want to interject something.
Yeah.
I'm sure Stefan will agree. I would love to do a separate podcast just on the realization process and how you work with that and your experience with that, because that is another big chunk of a whole other area.
Well, just a quick soundbite on the realization process. So Judith Blackstone, I think one of the things that she says quite often in her classes is, I don't know. She's a non-dual teacher who will often say, I don't know. And she says the reason that she says, I don't know, is because she really doesn't know. And so people will ask her things like, is fundamental consciousness God? And she says, well, if it is, she says, I don't know. And when I've spoken to her privately, she said, I don't know if she's changed her point of view on this since then, but her sense is that it would be less surprising to her if it were just a deeper level of her own being, this fundamental, unbroken field of consciousness. To me, I feel that if somebody pressed me, I would bet $1 that it is it is just, it's sort of like maybe the ground level of the soul or something like that, or it's a field of being that, you know, you can go to, and then you can, once you're there, you can access that presence and power of what I'm provisionally calling divinity. You can access that much easier, right? If you can just, you know, go down to a level of existence that feels like it's even deeper than inside, right? We have this felt sense of I'm over here, you're over there, I'm over here, and my environment is out there. But if you go down into your feeling level and then kind of past the feeling level into just being, and you can kind of feel that, you can feel that level of being just through the internal space of your body, maybe your aura surrounding your body a bit, but you can feel a just sense of a being. If you go deeper than that, you can feel a sense of unbound existence and the self luminosity of that pure existence without, it's like there's, you could say that maybe the content of our experience moves through that field of existence, but in and of itself, it does not move, right? It's an uncontracted, unmoving level of pure luminous existence. That is what I believe Judith Blackstone is talking about when she's talking about fundamental consciousness, or what non-dual teachers talk about when they talk about non-dual consciousness. Like Gary and I were saying before, I feel that divinity is something, I don't know what its relationship is to that, except that it's beyond that. Like if you go back to even some of the Christian mystics, like the anonymous British monk who wrote, what was it, The Cloud of Unknowing, right? He was saying that you go down into that state of quiet, and then you wait, you know, and then that's when divinity shines through. And even modern people like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Jürgen Ziva. He might be a good candidate for this podcast, actually, because he's somebody who has very developed multidimensional experiences, out-of-body experiences, and spiritual awakening experiences. And he talked about the initial phase of his awakening, which was non-duality, and then the later phase, which was divinity, or, you know, experiences of divinity. So anyway, I didn't mean to go on a tangent there, but
no, but that totally resonates. I never heard of this guy before, but that totally resonates, because the non-dual experience, I think a lot of people arrive at without too much effort, and that was one of the big selling points of the Finder's course that many of us are familiar with, is that you know, it doesn't take too much to get to that non-dual thing. But I think, and this again, this is just my belief that many people get there and say, okay, well, this is it, missing out perhaps on the next notch that this guy describes, whatever his name was, of divinity. I think, yeah, I'd love to check him out and bring him on if we can do that. What you'll give me his name?
Yeah, I'll send it to you in the Facebook Messenger chat. Yep, I'll send it.
But that was really beautifully said, Michael, because the word, the self luminosity aspect of it, where you can actually envision it inside your being, because that luminosity grows, and you can feel it and you can see it, and it in itself is singular to you. That luminosity experience has nothing to do with anybody else's luminosity experience. And the point of coming to a oneness and immersion into the one of consciousness at this point doesn't seem relevant, because to me, consciousness is having an experience in and through us. And as we develop along this thread, it's going to be individual until we get to that point of full luminosity, meeting everybody else's full luminosity. So, you know, I'm happy with that. I think you're right on the money. At least Gary and I agree in that area.
Well, at least we agree on something, Steph. No, we have a lot of agreement. There's just certain points where we don't agree, but we have a lot of agreement. And I certainly agree with you that Michael's been a great guest. Great guest.
He's been fantastic.
Fantastic guest. And if we feel there's enough there with the realization process. If you want to come back, Michael, we'll set something up if you want to do. But we've covered a lot of ground today, and this is a lot of food for thought. And yeah, I think this is a good one, because we did want to have a balance. And listen, I'll confess, I get a little fed up with the non-dual community at times too. It gets annoying. Okay, but I'm still, I'm still in there. But what I'm saying is that we want to have a balance. We don't want to just keep pitching one side. We have a great variety of guests coming up from all different points of view, astrologers and human design people and all kinds of people. So, but you have been a great counterweight to put this whole non-dual thing in perspective, and you've added so much. Thank you.
Oh, I appreciate your feedback, Gary. Yeah. One of the ways that I like to think about it is, when you get, I don't know if either of you are coffee drinkers, but when you go to a cafe and the barista will sometimes ask you, you want room for milk at the top or room for cream? Do you guys ever get asked that question? You want room at the top?
Yes.
So no, never. Okay. Well, anyway, I think the way I see it is that, we have a coffee cup that's filled with knowledge, right? But then there should always be room at the top for mystery. That's the way I see it.
Now I get to tell a story.
Okay.
One of my favorite Zen master stories. I'm sure you've heard it. We've all heard it 1,000 times, but I love it. So the guy goes to the Zen master. He wants to learn all about Zen Buddhism, and he's there, and he's so excited because I want to find all about Zen Buddhism. And of course, the master says, "Oh, yeah, relax. Let's have some tea first. In Japan we'd like the tea." So okay, so that's the guy's there, and so the person comes over and starts pouring the tea into the guy's cup, and pours and starts overflowing. He says, stop, you can't, stop, what are you doing? You can't put any more tea in there. Can't you see that? And the Zen master says, that's right. Your mind is so filled with ideas and beliefs and concepts and conditioning and all the thoughts that there's no room for Zen. You got to empty the cup. Then we can put the Zen in. So that's the whole thing. We're walking around, many people, with all these ideas, blah, 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 blah. There's no room for Zen. And that's where I like your allusion to, then the bandwidth expands, or then the cup empties, and now the tea of whatever, light, love, divine consciousness, whatever, blah, 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 truth, reality, whatever you want to call it, can come in. But as long as we're all bottled up with the full teacup, there's no room at the top for milk.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. I love that story.
One of my
awesome.
favorites.
All right, guys, this has been such a pleasure. Really I appreciate you having me on, and it was a joy to talk to you both. And if you ever want to do this again, I'm game.
Hey,
we're doing it again. We're going to do it again.
Okay.
We're going to do it again.
All right, guys.
Have a good one.
Thanks again. You too. All right. Take care.
All right. Yeah, I thought that was great, man. Michael just blew me away.
Well, I think we should mention some of the things that are happening down the road. We have Jean Brousseau on Wednesday coming up. She's going to talk about her artwork and how art manifested in her life. Then we have Tim Class coming up, who is another non-duality person who will be here next week. And after that, we have Phil Hershey, who's going to talk about how music affects spirituality, which is a topic I'm really interested in. I can't wait to sit down with Phil and talk about that. And then we have a very interesting guest coming on. Alice Ethna Heron is coming on in January, and she's going to talk about her PhD thesis, which is about atheists and their mystical experiences. What a topic, man. Atheists and their mystical experiences.
I'm very interested in that. I'm very interested in that topic, because that's a new realm to me. And let's not leave out Marion Tortorella. She is from Woodstock, and she's a very accomplished astrologer. I've had readings with Marion. We're going to talk about astrology.
Lisa Carrillo is coming in on December 17th. Carrillo.
Now, Lisa is great. She's very, very popular. She has been one of the most popular guest speakers. She's also part of the POK community, but she also has been a guest speaker there. Very, very popular. Well, here's Lisa's book. I'm reading it. It's called An Unprincipled Life, Living from the Unknown. Lisa has a very interesting take on things. It's going to be exciting to talk to Lisa Carrillo.